Hello and welcome to this week's vlog from Madison's, which, as I promised you last week, is going to be my latest economic outlook and forecast. As ever, I'm drawing on the great resource of Roger Martin Fagg. I'm a member of Property Academy, which is a wonderful institution that I meet with other owners of estate agents every other month. And as part of my membership there, you get lots of access to really great industry experts, trusted advisors. And I've been telling you about Roger's predictions for the last year or so, which I absolutely firmly agree with. Hard economics simply gets it wrong too often. They have a lot of forecasting models, and of course there is no forecasting model for what we've been through with COVID. And of course those forecasting models and those hard economic policies don't take account of the fact that people don't always make rational decisions. So Roger is very much a behavioural economist, and and because of that, because of overlaying all those economics with the way that people behave, he gets it right time and time again. So looking back to last year, I remember very well many of my very big learned colleagues in the town, those big corporate estate agents, predicted a price drop coming out of lockdown, predicted a further price drop when the market boomed in 2020, thought there'd be another price drop in 2021. Hasn't happened. I predicted, along with Roger, that prices would rise, there would be a boom, and it's been correct so far. So let's see, this might cheer you up on what I think will happen over the next short to medium term. Well, the first thing to remember is the economy acts like a hose pipe. Money flows in and it comes out the other end. This chart here is showing you this, and what basically affects the level of GDP in the economy is how often that money gets spent. How often do you take your £1 and spend it again in the economy, recycle it? Going to a restaurant, a cafe, a shop, going on holiday, all those sort of things. Well, lockdown put a foot down on that hose pipe. It meant that money was flowing in because of the enormous amount of support that the government had given, or that many people were still earning but just working from home, but they simply couldn't spend it. So of course I mentioned there that that government support was quite huge. That's called quantitative easing in the world of hard economics. It's when the Bank of England, which is effectively the money tree for the government, has a good old shake, and the government basically uses the Bank of England to finance a particular issue. This graph here, you can see there was an enormous amount of quantitative easing back in 2011, 2012, and there is now a huge level of quantitative easing again. You can see that all that excess money has been pumped into the economy, which basically means that every household has had an injection of cash. Extra money has been printed, it's in the economy, it's floating around, and it's in there at the moment, unable to be spent because of that lockdown. So what we saw in 2020, and certainly in July, was as lockdown eased, the money flowed astronomically. Just imagine a hose pipe that had a huge build-up and then suddenly it burst forward. So GDP in July 2020 was up against GDP in July 2019. And also what's quite interesting to see is there is a direct link between house prices and money supply. Now this is quite a good chart here. It shows you prices rising and how they rise directly in relation to the money supply. So if you look at that price rise, the blue dots that you're seeing here are price rises. And I want you to look at between 2014 and 2019 on this chart. And you can see there that blue dot of house prices rose from 2% to 9%. So what happened in 2014? Well, the government announced their Help to Buy scheme. And although that only affected 2,000 people who actually bought and took advantage of it, it did mean that the property market, and certainly the UK national public, felt that the government was underwriting the property market. They were effectively bolstering it, supporting it, saying, we feel this is a safe bet. And as a result, prices rose dramatically. Now, of course, we have the 95% mortgage that's just been announced. So the government in the spring budget announced that they will guarantee 95% mortgages, and you watch what will happen to the banks with that. They will lend massively into that market. They will have the support of the government, and it will feel them. It's a very, very low risk venture for them to get involved in. Banks work on the tightest margins you can imagine now to make money. Most of their money is made from mortgage lending. They don't lend massively to small, medium enterprises like myself, where you can charge bigger margins. They lend predominantly in very low risk environments where they don't make much money. And so they're going to love the 95% first time buyer market. But of course, for a first-time buyer to get on the property market, they've got to have their deposit. And look at this chart here. I think this is an amazing chart. It does show you how much the money that is in the economy has gone up dramatically. People are simply sitting on a lot more money. Young are unable to spend their money. They're unable to go on holiday, to festivals, to gigs, to shops, all that sort of thing. So they are sitting. There's about 100 billion of savings in the economy at the moment. I'm sure you ask yourself, are you feeling more wealthier at the moment than you would normally? Because you might not have been paying for your train ticket to London. You haven't been able to go on holiday, go to a festival, have friends around for dinner, meet friends and go out for dinner. So I guarantee that you, just like me, are feeling a little bit wealthier at the moment and feeling that actually, yeah, you've got quite good money. And this chart here shows you that the levels of mortgage lending was up last year, was up at 2007 levels, which I think everybody would reflect and agree was a fabulous boom time. We know what was coming around the corner in 2008, but mortgage lending in 2007 reflected that confidence that was out there in the market. But what about unemployment? The media talks about this an awful lot. 800,000 people unemployed at the moment. They do love those negative headlines, our press. Do watch those, don't let them get you down too much. The reality is most of those people that are unemployed are young and in the hospitality sector. So as soon as those sectors open again, they will find employment again. Also really interesting, did you know 1 million EU residents left the UK last year? Will they come back? Unlikely. Does that therefore mean there's actually been a net increase of potential availability of jobs and the pool of people that could get those jobs, because there is simply not as much supply from all those EU workers? So mum and dad probably feeling quite wealthy, child feeling quite wealthy, therefore will start to get onto that property ladder. The banks will lend and will support that. They will go heavily into the buy-to-let market as well themselves, probably predicting and looking at this price growth. So watch this space on that one. And what we're also seeing, interestingly, as that growth into the market comes, is how prices are levelling out. This is a really interesting chart to show you how in the those northern regions, people are thinking, actually, I don't need to be quite as close to my city or my place of work. And so you can see there's a real levelling out. So the government need there to be a mega boom coming. I've talked endlessly about this. With Brexit, we cannot be seen to have failed to have left the EU. We need to have a strong economy, and there's also a general election coming. And history shows that the year before a general election, property prices rise because the government gets how much they need to support that to make people feel good about the economy. So there are lots and lots of changes coming. Companies have been efficient during lockdown. I have introduced a number of operational efficiencies in my business that mean that should be making better money, better profit, and other companies have done the same. So I think operational efficiency, supporting that 95% market, buyers coming heavily into the property market because they've got so many savings, and evaluating where they live, is their house right for them? I think we'll see a mini boom for 4 years. Prices will rise, and we might see double-digit prices for 4 years. This slide here just summarises a few of those changes and just sort of summarises this is all the upside of what has happened post-COVID. We can see that lending is very, very cheap. Lockdown has introduced all those extra deposits. Mum and dad are not getting a real return for their liquid savings, so they will help their children get onto the property ladder, and they're feeling wealthy themselves. Property is always a hedge against inflation. That's the one downside that we might see, is that inflation might start to run away. And if it does, then property is where we tend to flood to. There's excess money in our system, million plots with planning permission. They've got to be built. More property should be bought. And COVID is causing that shift from cities to rural locations. But please don't think that the city is dead. The city is not dead for 1 minute. It's where the young go to find their partner. It's just change the demographic of what we'll see there. There'll be less families living there. They will move out to the regions. But certainly the city is still great for youngsters. So I think the money will absolutely flow. The only downside is, as I say, that inflation. So watch interest rates. I don't think interest rates will be touched for a good few years, and certainly until COVID is a distant memory. I don't think they'll touch taxation on property either. And sorry, I don't mean that COVID will ever become a distant memory, actually. I think we'll simply learn to live with it. It's a really sad fact. 90% of COVID deaths were for people who were obese. And so for the rest of us, the reality is that we should survive. It's not a killer illness if you're fit, healthy, and not of what is that real elderly category. The long COVID is horrible, and they're obviously doing a lot of research to deal with that, but I think we'll just learn to live with it like we did flu. And once we've adjusted to it, then we'll see what happens. 2027, 2028 could see a different move. I hope that's put a smile on your face. It's put a smile on mine, certainly, as I think about where the property's going to go, market's going to go for the next 4 years. I'll see you next week with my usual roundup of all property news. Bye-bye.